Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders, viewable on YouTube and Oppenheim TV. Today, we are chatting with amazing leaders from the science education field. Stephen Schnell, Executive Director of the Science Zone in Casper, Wyoming. Matt Sinclair, CEO of the Kiewit Luminarium in Omaha, Nebraska. And Joe Cox, President and CEO of the Museum of Discovery and Science in Fort Lauderdale. So thank you all for joining us. I am just so excited. Some of us have talked over the years about science education, and isn't this the moment for science education in the United States? We have so much that is riding on science, whether it's our businesses through AI or cars or our medical technology. Science is really the future. It is creating the new world. So, Stephen, let's go from west to east, and let's start with you. And we have different museums of different sizes, different scales, different constituencies, but there's a lot in common that you have with all of your fellow science centers and discovery centers as you educate children and families. So, Stephen, give us the perspective from Casper, Wyoming.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're as ASTC, the Association of Science and Technology Centers, classifies us as a small museum. We've got about 20,000 square feet of space here, and the community here in Casper is hovering around 55,000. So not a whole lot of folks here. However, one of the past governors of Wyoming described the state as a small town with just really long roads. And we have very much embraced that, because while we are serving our community through hands-on exhibits and open-ended programs, we are also trying to take all of that on the road as much as humanly possible. So we are serving almost the entirety of the state of Wyoming. It takes a while to drive around the state, but it's nice to be able to get into those communities that don't have access to a hands-on science center. And we do that through the use of taking exhibits and programs into libraries where people can access things for free. And then what's nice is we get a lot of families and their kids interacting with these things. And the impact that we have is incredible. So yeah, that's just a little bit about us.
And Matt, you and I got to know each other when we recruited you to the Discovery in Reno, Nevada. And now you're about to take the helm of the Kiewit Luminarium. Talk a little bit about how you see the sector and how you see these museums in different communities serving their constituents.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I recently got to go through the whole interview process all over again. And one of the things that I shared in those conversations that we have over and over again with so many different folks is, it's been my pleasure to do this work for the last 30 years or 3 decades, whichever one of those makes me sound experienced and professional, but not old and tired. But this is my 4th museum that I've been a part of, and the 3rd one that I've had the pleasure to lead. And here in Omaha, we're a bit bigger than Stephen. We have a metro area of a little over 1 million folks. We're a 100,000 square foot museum, and by the same ASTC standards, we basically sit at the upper end of the middle or medium-sized museum category. We just sort of sit right there on that threshold of small, or medium to large. What's interesting about the Luminarium is that we are a purpose-built 2-year-old museum. The museum just celebrated our 2nd birthday this last week. And so it is still very much in the startup phase. But we are one of 5 museums here in the Omaha community. And so stepping in as the newest museum into the informal learning ecosystem of Omaha is an interesting place to be. With regards to your question of, the role of STEM centers and museums like ours, I think we play a really pivotal role in not just the education of youth, and certainly the whole workforce development conversation is important. But really what we're creating and curating in our spaces are learning opportunities for whole family units to engage in learning and activities. We're very proud of the exhibits and the spaces that we get to create, but that's really secondary. What is the learning and the magic happens when a youth sees the adult in their life engaged in learning in spaces like ours. And so when we can create a space and a moment where that gets to happen, that's the secret sauce, and that's what sets, I think, our spaces and our mission apart from maybe some of our other colleague institutions.
It's one of those things where, Joe, you were nodding and smiling, right? It's one of those things where, if you go into an art museum, the art can actually exist without a huge amount of interaction with the audience, particularly static pieces, a sculpture or a picture that is hanging on the wall. The audience is experiencing it, it's looking at it, might be discussing it, but it's not in the action, right, Joe? And when I saw you smiling, I was thinking, okay, he's thinking about the audience being part of the performance here when you have an exhibit, right?
It really is. It really is. I'm looking at the three of us all wearing our navy blazers today. And as I walk through the museum, none of our visitors have a care in mind when it comes to who is the guy in the tie with the gray beard walking around, because they are so engaged with what our incredible science facilitators are doing on the floor. And I love that we opened with this question about scale, because it's something that we've had a conversation, the three of us, probably about 427 times over the time that we've known each other. And it's so true. I mean, on the metrics, the Museum of Discovery and Science is certainly a larger institution with 150,000 square feet. This year, about a $13 million budget, and saw about almost 500,000 visitors last year. But the metro area in Broward is 2 million people in our community, which expands to 6 million when you look at the Tri-County area. And so we certainly serve, all of that community through outreach, through everything else. But it really comes down to, as Matt said, it's that personal interaction that makes science come alive. Our mission statement is connecting people to inspiring science. And each one of those words is important, because each one of our floor staff are the people who do that connection. And, when we say people, it's people because it's everyone. And so I love that you started on that question, because we're each, perfectly sized to serve our communities, and each do an incredible job bringing science to life each and every day.
And just before we went on camera, we were all talking about the fact that if you're a child, or even if you're an adult, right, you're living in your body. You don't care whether the space that is outside of what you're currently experiencing is bigger or smaller, whether the organization has more or less wealth. You don't care about anything other than the fact that in that moment, you're learning how an airplane stays in the air. You're playing. And even as an adult, right, where you have all these things that are, all these thoughts in your head, right? And you see your child or you see your grandchild in there, or you see your friend and you see their children, you're in that moment. There is a real release that happens through the experiences that people have within your spaces, regardless as to whether they're bigger or smaller, or whether they're on the road, right, Stephen?
Absolutely. Yeah. I was just the other day, this brought to mind, just the other day, I was playing with one of my daughters who's 7, and in our water table, and we have these Lego blocks and this water. And the idea is, hey, can you build like an aqueduct? Can you dam the water? That sort of thing. And, she and I were trying to figure out the best way to do this. And there's other people, there's other things going on, but none of that matters. Like, this in the moment is the only thing that matters. And her sister was off someplace else, playing with something else. And the the only thing that mattered, like you said, was right here in front of me.
I'd like to talk a little bit about how you create that spirit of play within the moment, because that in and of itself is an art form. If you take a look at what happens in a theatrical production, and you talk with actors, you talk with the people who are on the stage, they talk about the fact that the spirit of the company, how the director interacts with them feeling empowered to improvise right in the moment, take risks, and so on. That is so important to quality performance. And it's a very sensitive thing because you do have structure. You, Joe, have to worry about the safety of children on the floor, right? You might have to worry about traffic. You have business issues that you have to deal with, Stephen, right? There is a certain amount of structure, but there's also this idea of spirit. Could you all just hold forth about how you engender this spirit? Joe, you kind of referred to it, that it's everybody who is involved that adds to that. How do you create that spirit, the stuff that is not the business process, not the stuff that builds an exhibit, but is a spirit of the place?
I love that you kind of compared it to theater because, I tell our team all the time, each and every day, we're putting on a show. When you leave your office and you step out onto the museum floor, you're stepping on stage and you are part of a production that, for us, 20% of our visitors are tourists. And so this may be the only time they ever come to the museum when they've got a few hours to kill before they get on a cruise ship to go on vacation. And so that 3-4 hours that we have with them, we have the opportunity to create memories that will hopefully last a lifetime. And I always ask our staff to remember, think back to 5th grade when you went on a field trip. Do you remember what you did in math class the next day? Probably not. But you absolutely, if it was a great field trip to a great science museum, a great children's museum, you probably vividly remember who you had lunch with, what you had for lunch, what you played with. Matt's daughter's going to remember that experience. And, she gets to go to the museum all the time. But if you're a visitor and you come once, we have that 3-4 hour window to make memories that will last a lifetime. So it's absolutely putting on a show every day.
Yeah, I think the environments that we create, if we did a side-by-side comparison of our 3 museums, 3 different sizes, we probably all share a dozen different exhibits, right? There are exhibits and concepts that are taught consistently across the board in every science center from coast to coast. And every single one of them is slightly different, has a different look and feel to it. And, I had the chance to run an exhibit shop and work with exhibit designers. And, the amount of time and effort and thought that goes into curating and building these things is really amazing. And we put them on the floor. And then our visitors make them something entirely different, right? And we'll spend millions of dollars building a fancy exhibit, and then it's the simple thing that's in the corner that's been there for 30 years that is the iconic experience. When I started in this work, I worked for the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. It was old when I started, and it's older still, and it's now in its 4th or 5th iteration of a building. When we moved to the waterfront on the Willamette River, 20 years later, there were generational visitors who were commenting in the comment cards where an exhibit was in the museum that they remembered from their childhood, right? And so people build this affinity. To Joe's point, there are these aha memorable moments with very simple things. And I think that for those of us in this field, it's important to remember to keep it simple, keep it straightforward. Yes, we're going to build new stuff. We're a very innovation-driven industry, but some of the fundamentals, some of the basic stuff are the things that create the spark, that build that memory Joe was talking about, that is replicated generation after generation, which is so powerful and exciting about the curated space that we create.
I want to ask you a particular take on this question, because you have expertise that none of us have, given the fact that you live in a rural state where the distances are quite long. I did the work in Alaska for the Anchorage Museum. You have the same kind of thing. If you're going to bring these experiences in Alaska to remote villages, it has to do with planes, right? You have to fly in because in some of these places there are no roads. How do your people, do you create sort of exhibits or experiences in a transportable kind of a tub where you can bring it into the school? How do you actually set up to ensure that people across Wyoming have exposure to the riches of the Science Zone?
The short answer is yes. All of those ways. So currently, we, as of right now, we have an exhibit that it was just at another museum, actually outside of Wyoming. It's in Montana and headed down to the university in Laramie. And it literally just got put on a truck and is headed down. So that's one way. So some of these larger exhibits, they're being shipped, across the state. We have somewhat smaller exhibit pieces that they are, 4x3 or so, and we put those on a trailer, and then we trailer those up, and we set those up in a library. We have some right now that are two of those exhibits that are in Riverton at their library, and they've been there for a little over a month. And we've been getting messages from their librarians telling us just how engaging these things are. And in fact, when we were setting it up, like the moment we stepped back from setting these two up, there was a herd of homeschool kids that came over to it and started playing with it and having the best time. They were doing this, they were doing that. They were launching rockets up to the second floor of the library. And it sounds like that has not stopped, which we love hearing. And then the other aspect of this is, yes, absolutely putting stuff into totes. And then we'll be going back here in a few weeks to that library and be doing more of a facilitated event. So we will have several different stations set up so that families can go and wander through, what we have available, from robots to other rocket making things, chromatography, that sort of thing. And I believe, to Matt's point, what we are facility manipulating is this moment of time where the parent and the child are getting to experience this together. Our paper rocket building exhibit is a perfect example, because we have seen countless times parents that are so engaged in building this perfectly shaped rocket, making sure that the fins are excellent, and working with their kid so that their kid gets to see them excited and really engaged. And that is where we know we are winning. Like, this is where what we are doing matters. Giving this opportunity to this kid for them to see their parent, their grandparent, incredibly engaged. So
phenomenal. Thank you so much for that description. It's very vivid, and I think we're all nodding along and smiling because we've all experienced that ourselves in our own lives. I'd like to inflect a little bit to a discussion about the scientific method. Before we started recording, we talked about the fact that you have this situation in the country right now that, to me, is ironic. Our industry, our economic vitality, our civil society depends so much on the product of science. Whether it's information technology, artificial intelligence, whatever we're experiencing right now through these videos, this is all the product of science. Medical technology. We do a lot of work for medical research organizations that are figuring out the consequences of evolutionary biology as it affects gut health and cancers and heart disease and so on. When we look at aerospace, you name the industry, manufacturing, the Dyson vacuum cleaner, all that is a little turbine that happens to be more effective at creating suction than conventional vacuum cleaners were. That's a physical, it's a physical phenomena. It comes out of science. So we have a situation where repetition and promoting a message is taking the place of the scientific method and analysis. How do you see your role in helping people to think through the consequences of how they think about stuff, about evidence and about analysis and about hypothesis and all those things? Joe, why don't you take it initially, and then Matt and Stephen, if you could all comment in terms of, because you're not there to lecture people, right? You're not going to sit up there and draw on a blackboard with thousands of students sitting there all at attention, listening to your discussions about the scientific method. How do you deal with that idea of trying to advocate this thing that is so important to us all, to our economy, to our financial health? Joe?
Yeah, Mark, when I joined the museum in 2018, one of the first projects we took on after we came out of our strategic planning process was the creation of a major maker space as part of an overhaul of our aviation gallery. So it's a aviation themed maker space. And the reason we started there was, I say often what science museums do is, not just give out facts. Sure, people believe what they read in science museums. We've got great, 96% of people believe, and all of that great trust factor. But we teach children and adults, but we teach children how to think. We teach children how to think. Up in the maker space, big, giant, on the wall twice is the engineering design process. It's like, what is the challenge? Come up with a solution, iterate, test, create, the whole process. Because ultimately, if you can think, imagine, create, iterate, we're preparing children for jobs that don't exist yet, right? A child today, Steve's daughter's 7 years old, is going to grow up in a world where AI is as ubiquitous as a keyboard. And, it's like I've gone through none of that existing. Like, right? Cassette tapes were my most innovative technology when I was 7. I had a Walkman and I was so amazed that this was like cutting edge technology. But we've got to prepare them for jobs that don't exist yet. And that is getting harder and harder, because how do you keep up, and how do you keep pace, and how do you think further ahead? And the way you do that, I truly believe, is through that engineering design process, through embedding that, because that then leads to fact checking, that then leads to, is this true? Is this fake? How do I get that information, and how do I know? So, we are all about, being part of that STEM pipeline to future careers, whether they exist or don't at this point.
And Matt, aren't you also including the art side to this, right? The creative side, because there's something that Joe was saying that just sort of struck a chord with me. It's the idea of fun. It's not tedious investigation. It's not tedious analysis. It's doing fun stuff that leads to new stuff.
We oftentimes, within our professional circles talk about, and with our donors, we talk about, we're in the aha business, right? We get to be in that business where we get to create the experience where somebody has a moment where the light bulb goes off for them. And, unfortunately for too many students, that doesn't happen in the classroom. It's regimented, it's structured. We've overburdened teachers. We've taken so many of those opportunities for teachers to provide that in the classroom away. And so where that happens for students now and more frequently is in informal learning environments like ours, where they get to dictate the experience and the rules, and they get to choose what tickles their fancy and gravitate towards that. And so, again, looking at the intersection between where art informs science and science informs art, we don't have to play in rigid lanes, in an informal learning space. We can play fast and loose with the rules, because our end game is how do we create inspiration, and how do we create critical thinkers? And, I know we're all trained to be Switzerland and not talk politics, so I'm not talking politics here. But facts are stubborn things. John Adams taught us that. Excuse me. And during the pandemic, what we saw front and center, and this was a discussion with our staff, was we got to see on play before our eyes a real litmus test of where scientific literacy sits in our country right now. We got to all experience it together, really around the globe. And for those of us in the STEM community, you could either be really disheartened by that, and certainly there were some days where all of us felt that way, but you could also see that as the opportunity, right? Our critical thinking and scientific literacy feels like it's at an all-time low, which just further reinforces the opportunity and the need for institutions like ours to come in and help to teach that next generation of, workforce development is important. Creating the next engineer or AI programmer or whatever the job is that we don't even know exists is important, but also just elevating our general population's scientific, not even literacy, but curiosity is hugely advantageous to our collective futures.
Well, a jet stays in the air not because of assertion, but because of research and engineering, right? I mean, I don't want to have somebody assert that a pretty design is going to keep me safe. I want to have an engineer tell me, that's why I get on planes without huge worries, right? I want to have a vaccine against measles, because measles are pain, even at my age, right? And especially at my age. So, Stephen, when you're trying to help people, and what you're trying to do is not indoctrinate them, you're trying to help them look at phenomena, analyze for themselves, explore for themselves, reach their own conclusions. This is just basically an offering. I love what you said about the libraries, where you bring an exhibit on rockets, and all of a sudden children are launching those rockets up to the second floor of the library. That's fabulous, right? And they'll reach their own conclusions, because it'll either work or it won't work, right?
What's nice is that iterative process that Joe was talking about with the engineering design process. For some kids, it seems to be innate, because they will approach this rocket building activity, and then they'll watch it and they'll see it and go, wonder if I can make it higher. And they'll do that, and then after they do that a few times, they'll say, I wonder if I could make it not leave the launch pad after giving it all of the air pressure possible. So then they take a giant ball of tape to add weight to the thing and try to make the thing, not leave the launch pad. And so the fundamental thing that we're doing is we're inspiring curiosity and allowing kids the opportunity to earn those critical thinking skills and the problem solving skills. And those are the tools that we are trying to instill in everyone, from the littlest kids that are coming to the adults. Then, as you were talking about, the role of our institutions in communicating science, I see our opportunity as a clearinghouse, as creating a space for discussion. We have an opportunity.
Discussion. Oh, so you're getting into politics. I love that. Wait a second. I love that. Right? You're creating an opportunity. Look, let's say you're worried about measles, and you decide to use vitamin A, and a measles outbreak happens and your child gets affected. Well, you're learning stuff. You're going to respond. You might respond differently because that way didn't work, so maybe a different way will work. I mean, that is part of this, right? I mean, we have to make sure that we give people the space to explore, right? And not try and tell people how they should think. They should figure it out for themselves. Your missions, all of you, is to create the discussion. That's not politics. That's just creating opportunity for people to interact, right?
Well, and that's your scientific method, Mark, right? I mean, every great scientific discovery is published in a peer-reviewed journal where scientists are trained to be critical and challenge and reproduce the results of others.
You mean that scientists aren't all like conformant and they never argue and they already know everything?
It is that old that adage of iron sharpens iron, right? Or hardens iron. It's that thoughtful debate and discussion that improves our collective, scientific literacy.
Well, that's the thing that we need, Joe. We need people talking to each other. We need people challenging each other. We need people mixing it up, right?
It is. We're leaning all in on critical thinking on our next big exhibit, actually. We're in the process of designing a kind of major new, about 7,500 square foot climate solutions exhibit, and spent a couple of years really trying to understand how best to tell this story in a way which would encourage conversations, but be inspirational, hopeful, and optimistic so that you are inspiring change and kind of creating environmental stewards. And where we landed was we really want to lean in on these positive character traits, on critical thinking, on cooperation, on caring, and on confidence, because there's a lot going on in the world. And if you're a 7-8-year-old kid, the world literally may seem on fire. And so we wanted to tackle this exhibit in a way that we hope will take children and their families from this place of eco-anxiety. Mental health is a big issue in young people around climate initiatives, but take them from eco-anxiety to eco-action. And truly what we believe is that instilling positive character traits will give us a real boost in making that happen.
It's a great point to end up on. What you're saying is attitude is about empowerment, feeling empowered. And even if you don't know the answers yet, feeling empowered to explore and develop those answers, implement those answers, share those answers with your children or your parents or your fellows who are in a space. Exploring that together is the thing that creates optimism in this country. Stephen Schnell, Executive Director of the Science Zone in Casper, Wyoming, Matt Sinclair, CEO of the Kiewit Luminarium in Omaha, Nebraska, and Joe Cox, President and CEO of the Museum of Discovery and Sciences in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. This has been fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing the work that you do, the impact that you have, and please thank your staffs, please thank your funders, please thank your board members, please thank your audiences who enliven your space and your designers who create the experience. It's just been a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mark.